Hey folks, in this video, I'm going to teach you all about Shopify sections. Specifically, how Shopify sections work with Shopify's new theme architecture that we've seen all over Horizon themes. In this video, you're going to learn about how to create a custom section. You're going to learn how to add styles correctly to a custom section using the style tag. You're going to learn about section settings, and then obviously, we're going to cover theme blocks and how to set up theme blocks and style them and all that good stuff. If you are new to my channel, my name is Brandon and I create tutorials about how to build within Shopify themes. So if you're actively building in Shopify themes, I highly recommend you subscribe to my channel. So without further ado, let's jump into building our first custom section here. So quick note is I'll link this repository here that is built by Shopify, and I'll be just starting with this, but you don't necessarily need to start with this at all. So if we hop into Cursor over here or whatever you prefer to code in, which can even be the Shopify editor, I've gone ahead and I've created the basic layout for our section. So if you're familiar with sections, this may be a bit of a recap, and feel free to skip later into the video where we talk about nested groups. But if you are completely new to sections, what you'll need to know is that within the theme, there is a sections folder, and in the sections folder is where we create our sections. And so I've created a custom tutorial.liquid file here for our section, and I've added in style tags, which will act as the wrapper for our styling. Up here, I've added in just a basic div with custom tutorial text over here and our schema. And our schema is a way to template out our section. So we've given our section a name, custom tutorial, and I've just added in a basic text setting where we will eventually make this custom tutorial text dynamic inside the theme customizer. So now that you have that set up, you'll notice that if you go to add section, we don't actually see our section here yet. And that's because we need to give it a name for a preset that we can add with inside the theme customizer here. So if I go over to the documentation, which I will also give a link to in the description, you can see how sections are set up, some of the basic settings that they use, how to render them out, and they'll also give us a little bit of insight on how to include a name for our section inside the theme customizer here. So if you go over into section presets, you'll be able to scroll down and you'll notice that, okay, great. So we have the basic schema set up currently because we have a name and some basic settings, but we need to display, a name for in the theme customizer that we can reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code here for presets and just drop it into my theme over here. So I'm going to go and I notice that, okay, so settings ends here at the square bracket. So I'm going to go over here and just drop in this presets. So right now we don't have any blocks, so we won't need to use that. And we won't need to necessarily use any of the setting presets, but we will need to give it a name. So I'm going to give it a name custom tutorial here. Now, if we go back into our theme customizer, we'll notice that we can hit add section, and then we now have custom tutorial here. So now at this point, you may be wondering, okay, cool, we've added a section in. We have the title custom tutorial here, but you'll notice if I change this title to like custom tutorial test, it's not reflected inside the theme customizer here. So if I open back up my theme editor, let's make this custom tutorial text dynamic. And so what we're going to want to do is remove this text here, and we're going to want to add curly braces. And then we are going to type section. So we're going to reference the section schema over here, dot settings. So we're referencing now the settings within the section. And then we're going to hit dot title over here so that we're referencing the title. Now, if we go back inside the theme customizer, you'll notice that now our title is dynamic, which is awesome. But as we know, what makes a section really stand out is how it's styled. And I have fairly opinionated ways on how we should style. But just as a really light overview, a couple really fantastic tips that I highly recommend that you do with every single section is number one, always giving your section a unique ID that you can reference. So in this case, I'm going to not necessarily give it the ID custom tutorial because that's not super unique, but I'm going to add in curly braces and I'm going to reference the section ID. And now when I do that, and if I go back over into the theme customizer here and inspect our code, but now that we go back inside here, you'll notice that we have the custom ID of template and then with the series of digits and then custom tutorial. So this is a bit of a unique identifier for the section. Now, the reason why that this is important is that let's say we want to add some sort of color setting to this. So again, in the documentation provided in the description, you can reference the different settings that you can add. But let's say we wanted to add in a color and we want to do a text color. And so we won't add info, we won't give it a default color, but we will give it a label of color over here. So now if I go up top over here, you'll notice that we can reference the section ID and we can reference the color. And more importantly, we can reference our H1 tag over here. So now if we go back into the theme customizer, you'll notice that we have this color picker and we can make this really whatever we want. So we can make it this blue color over here. And again, what's most importantly is now that we did that ID trick, if you didn't do it and you just read the H1, you would end up creating multiple sections and you couldn't change the color in each section. So now we're able to make, unique sections without duplicating and renaming all the IDs and everything. So it's just a really useful trick just to keep things dynamic. The other trick that I like to do is I always like to add a text class in here. And what I like to do is add in this text setting over here up into our class so that we can add in our own class for styling sections. So over here, I'm going to type in custom CSS, and I'm going to delete some of the settings that we don't need. So we don't need a default, but we will give it a label of custom CSS class. And what we'll do is we'll add in this ID all the way up top here into our classes. And again, we will reference this with section.settings.custom class up here. So now if we go back into the theme customizer here, you'll notice that we have this custom CSS class option. And now we could type in example class. And then within each one of our sections, we always have this custom CSS area inside the Shopify theme customizer. And what we can do is reference our custom class. Let me make this look proper here down below. So we can do .custom or example class. And then we can change, like, for example, the font size to 60 pixels and so on. So obviously this looks atrociously ugly, but I think you roughly get the idea. So that's the basic overview of how sections work and styling inside of sections work. Now, the next thing for us to discuss is how we add blocks and, more importantly, nested blocks inside of these sections. And so previously, 5 years ago, all the sections used to be flat in terms of hierarchy. So we couldn't actually click into any of these sections. But now we can add in blocks into each one of these sections. Like, instead of having, key concepts, liquid, and best practices, just like static over here, we could end up adding a block for each one of these. And so I'm going to show you how to do that using Shopify's new theme block method. And it's important to use this method going forward because it will be the one that is most supported by Shopify. And quite honestly, after developing with it over the last 6 months, it's the most dynamic way to build Shopify themes as well, because instead of, creating a bunch of files for each one of these components here, what we can do is we can create nested blocks, which are like reusable components or reusable blocks that we could use throughout the entire theme if we'd like. So in order to do that, I'm just going to hop back into the editor over here. And in our blocks folder, you'll notice I already have this block here called custom tutorial block. And you'll notice, like our section, it has a style tag up here. We also added just a basic div called custom tutorial block. And we also have our custom tutorial block schema over here. Now, you may already be a pro at this and notice that we actually need a preset. So I'm going to add that in called custom tutorial block. So now that that's added in, the question is, how do we attach that to our main section? How do we get this block to appear in our main section? And that is a great question. So if we go back into our custom tutorial file over here, what we're going to want to do is go into our past our name over here and then add in the block. And the cursor's already giving me the prompt for it, which is blocks. And then in brackets, we want type theme. So what this is saying is that we're referencing any of the blocks within the blocks folder. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you another trick if you don't want to make a block global like this one. But for now, let's make it global. So now what we're going to have to do is reference somewhere within our main div container over here, the blocks. So we're going to reference content for blocks. And so now basically any block within this blocks folder over here will be rendered in this content for blocks folder over here. So I'm going to back out and I'm going to refresh our theme customizer over here. And I am going to delete this ugly section over here. And just for my own sanity, honestly, I'm just going to change this to black. And I am going to add in our custom block, which we built. So custom tutorial block. So now we have a block. You'll notice here that is within the main section. Now I'm going to go back into our cursor here. I am going to style this block. So I'm going to add in the same coding method as we did before. I'm going to give this an ID, block ID, and then I'm going to add in that. And cursor already knows what I'm trying to do. And then back in here, I'm going to look at the block ID. I want to use background color and I'll add in the background color over here. What we're going to do is just give it a little bit of padding over here. And as we could see what we've done here, and I know I skipped over a couple of steps just because the AI at this point just essentially already knows what we want to type, but I've added in some padding within the block ID, which is linked to this div over here. And I've added a setting, which is a range setting below here that references the ID of padding. So really, we're referencing block.settings.padding. And in this case, what's different than the section is we're referencing block.settings, not necessarily section.settings. A common mistake people make is when they're building blocks, they're referencing section.settings, but really we want to reference block.settings. So we're referencing block.settings padding. So we're referencing the settings inside this block, which is padding. And now we should be able to add a background color and padding to our block inside the theme customizer. So if I hop back into the theme customizer, I'm just going to refresh my page and I'm going to just add some padding to this block. And I'm going to add in some, a bit of a background color so we can see it here. Great. So still looks kind of ugly, but at least we've made a little bit of progress. Now, you may be wondering, what if I, want to add multiple blocks? Well, what you can do is duplicate this block, a few times, and we could even add some sort of CSS to put this inside of a row, and then we'll make a column. So now if we go over to our section file, what we want to do to display all the blocks horizontally is reference our section ID over here. So the main ID of the section, and we are going to make them flex. So flex in a row and then add a little bit of gap of 12 pixels and then make sure that they're aligned center both vertically and horizontally. So now if we go back inside the customizer, we're starting to see that we're getting a bit of a row. Now, obviously, we don't want the title to display in a row. With them, we'll probably want the title to go above. So in order to do that, what we would do is actually add in another div. And then this would be the wrapper for the blocks. And then instead of referencing the section ID above, so the whole container, we would just want to reference this blocks area over here. Now, one more useful thing that we should note is if you are building this for your own store or for a client, sometimes you don't want all blocks to be global. So when I say global, you don't want once the block is created, you don't want it to show up everywhere on your site. You just want the block to be for the section. So in order to do that, what we do is we um, change the type to reference the file directly. And if we want the block hidden, what we do is we add in an underline. And so we'll have to go up here and then click rename and then add the underline to the blocks file up here. And once the underline is added before the file name within the blocks folder, we won't be able to view that block globally across the site. So we won't be able to view that block within a product area or within another section that the block might not be useful for. So once that's done, I'm going to go over into our section and I'm just going to refresh here and I'm just going to hit add block, and we'll notice now not all the other blocks show up, but just the custom tutorial block. And you'll notice what this does is it allows us to have a really clean way of adding blocks without not a lot of other mess in terms of blocks that we might not want to reference over here. So I'm just going to add in a couple blocks, and obviously they are unstyled. And I'm going to click into each block and I'm just going to give it, a little bit of padding. And you'll notice that since we made each block, styled based off of the block ID, each block can now be completely different, which is really, really nice to have. Now, I think I will stop the tutorial here because I think at this point you probably get the gist of how the new nested blocks architecture works inside of modern themes. But if you like this video and you want to see more videos like this, I can go into more in depth on how to, build, block repeaters and how to do really advanced styling techniques with each one of the blocks, and even how to pull in dynamic content with meta fields and so on with each one of these blocks. So anyways, thank you for watching and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you guys in the next video.